The commission that you and Congressman Lee Hamilton headed that produced the Iraq study report had some specific things to say about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and how it might be settled. Could you sort of summarize those for us?
But let me just read you very briefly, Landrum, what we say. The United States will not be able to achieve all of its goals in the Middle East unless it deals directly with the Arab-Israeli conflict. There has to be a renewed and sustained commitment by the United States to a comprehensive Arab-Israeli peace on all fronts. This commitment has to include direct talks with, by, and between Israel, Lebanon, Palestinians, those who accept Israel's right to exist, and particularly Syria. The United States does its ally Israel no favors in avoiding direct involvement to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict. There is no military solution to this conflict. It's not going to be solved militarily. The vast majority of the Israeli body politic, as I said earlier, wants to see peace. They're tired of being a nation perpetually at war. And we have to keep in mind that no American administration, whether it's Democrat or Republican, will ever abandon Israel. Political engagement and dialogue are essential in the Arab-Israeli disputes, and the only basis on which peace can be achieved, in our view, is pursuant to UN Resolutions 242 and 338.
At various times, both of you have made statements about the fact that there's a virtual package deal on the table already, that both Palestinians and Israelis know pretty much what the deal would be. How would you define that deal?
Well, you know, by the end of the Clinton administration, the Taba Accords had set out basically the four major areas of contention: 67 borders, Jerusalem shared, no right of return, and a non-militarized Palestinian state. And there was broad agreement on that. Now, that covers a lot of details that need to be worked out. But it's not as if we were starting afresh.
If you look at the Geneva proposal, yes. If you look at the policies of the International Quartet, if you look at the U.S. Government official policies, and if you look at the international orders issued from the Security Council resolutions, and if you look at the unanimous decision of the Arab countries to offer Israel peace, they're all exactly the same.
It will be two states living side by side in peace and hopefully security and peace. Right. There will be many of the settlements that have been built in the areas immediately surrounding Jerusalem will be retained by the Israelis. Palestinians will be given an equal amount of land elsewhere to make up for the loss of that territory. The Palestinians will have some place in or close to Jerusalem that they could claim as their capital. The right of return will end up being, in my view, a right to return to the Palestinian state, and there will be compensation for lands that have been taken.
And both sides have had the chance to discuss this at length.
At length.
But no one from the outside, at the level that we're talking about, namely the President of the United States, has been willing to take the bit in his teeth and say, this is the position of the United States. And incidentally, if he says that, it will not be just the position of the United States. I would be willing to bet you, Landrum, I would be willing to bench you a lot of money that almost every country in the world would endorse it.
Including the Arabs.
Well, of course the Arabs, but the Asians and Latin Americans and Europeans.
And this is one of the reasons the president needs to step up and say, this is the American proposal, so that the Palestinians can go back, the Palestinian leadership can go back to people, the Israeli leadership can go back and say, you know, this is not exactly what we would want, but the Americans made us do it.
Right. Yeah. You've talked about the fact that a package deal would be supported by governments all over the world, including the Arabs. Now, some time ago, the New York Times ran a full-page ad sponsored by Arab governments saying that they were prepared to make a complete and solid peace with Israel. Do you think this is a sincere proposal the Arabs have put forward?
Look, I don't care if it's sincere or not sincere. The fact is, if the United States came out with what Brent and I are talking about, they would back it, and that's what's important. What's in their heads or in their hearts, look, one can speculate, but it's not constructive.
And there is an Arab proposal that was made first in 2002, but has since been reiterated by King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, that if there is a deal, that the Arab states will recognize Israel, normalize relationships with Israel. That's a very positive statement that supports what's on that page.
And if the president speaks up decisively and strongly in favor of peace, outlines what the basic parameters of peace ought to be, and as Brent said earlier, these parameters are sort of understood by the people, but no one has really stood up, someone with real clout and prestige, to articulate them, then the ball game changes fundamentally.